Morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone. How's it going?
Hello. Happy Tuesday.
It is a Tuesday.
I'm telling you what, these even numbers on Tuesdays are still throwing me off and it's bugging the heck out of me.
What do we need to do to correct that?
We need
a bonus episode.
We need a bonus episode. That's what we need. All right.
Bonus episode.
Hey, for all of you in the chat, what sort of bonus episode would you like to see?
What would be a good Wednesday at noon kind of question?
Yeah, throw it out into the episode ether of the Explicit Measures podcast.
We'll have to go watch this video again because that topic we'll catch later. Just because we're not watching this one live. This is a recorded episode, and we're recording this
3 of 3, last one, right?
Yeah, this is the last one.
Yeah,
we're not gonna record anymore for this one. We've had vacations, people are moving around, stuff's happening, so we decided to get these out of the way early. However, what I would say though is, this episode just occurred after we put children down for bed, and I think in all the, let me say it this way. We spend a lot of time talking about data and things and people and the process and the technology. I feel like I'm not the only one who thinks about people and process when it comes to our families. Do you guys do the same thing? Is there a hey, there's a behavioral problem happening. Therefore, I think now that I've learned all this stuff in the podcast, I should probably implement a new process. We need some governed process.
Governance strategy.
Another governance strategy on how to get my kids to bed on time. So I'll give you an example of my family. Right, we have had a behavioral approach inside our family. We would put everyone down to bed. We had a bedtime. That's what it is. Everyone gets their teeth brushed, and then go to the bathroom. You need to get your water. You're in bed, and then mom and dad walk around each room and say goodnight, and we'll pray with you and do the good night stories, whatever, done. Right. So we would go, and Kelly and I, my wife, we would go into our room and just like, okay, we're done. The house is shut down. We're exhausted from people at this point.
Yeah.
And what we hear is doors creaking open, little feet down the hallway. There's noise in the bathroom, feet back in the hallway. And then my wife walks out of the room one time and she goes, what's going on? They're like all in one kid's room. They're like having like a hoopla in one kid's room. We're like, what is going on here? This is not going to happen. And this has like been regularly happening. So we like push them down to bed, get into bed. We're going to bed. And they're inevitably getting up. So we've had to instill new processes around, okay, if I come out here and people are getting out of their bed, someone's getting punished. There's some kind of punishment happening. We're getting technology removed from tomorrow. I'm closing your door and turn off everyone loves their door open a little crack. They don't like to have the doors closed all the way. And if they get out of their room, it's like, I'm going to close your door all the way. And they hate that. Can't stand it. So that's been my example of trying to we're trying to look at some of the behavior pieces here in our family. Do you guys do the same thing? Do you have any kind of similar process changes you're making?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's where people process technology turns into people process and punishment.
Punishment, right? The PPP.
The P's. Yeah, I mean, for us, we have a similar cadence, right? The more routine the kids have at night, the greater we have
success of getting them to bed. Yeah,
and the not so easy.
Yep.
So it's snuggles, prayers, bedtime, right?
Yep.
For one, and the other is like we're all part of doing snuggles, prayer, bedtime, but then there's more, and then there's more. And then there's more. And
one more thing. It's come back in. I want to talk again. One more prayer.
Yeah, if you don't listen to me the first time, I might ramp it up. And if you don't listen to me that time, I might ramp it up some more until the whole house. And it's kind of like where we're exploring different options. Is hey, we do this routine. Here's where the line in the sand starts, and when you start crossing that line, there's no negotiation anymore. We're just gonna follow through with things that you're not gonna like. And so far, it's been successful, depending on which people have been implementing it, the process. So we'll see how it goes. But yes, there are.
What happens in the Italian household? What goes on in
a lot of yelling? So. It's audibly loud until everyone was in bed. So,
oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Just like, that's my boy.
There's a lot of threatening things that will never happen. Like, if you don't go to bed, I will take your bed from you. Slam.
Oh, that's good.
Honestly, though, you got to remember, like, think about when your kids were 1 year old and they would just kind of look at you and start like pushing their plate over just to see what you did. That's all they're doing, just at a more advanced stage. So you have to understand.
I
have to remember.
Levels, keep pushing the boundaries until they find the brick wall, and then they won't push past that anymore.
As we just talked about in our previous episode, they're trying to find their own benchmark of what's acceptable.
Oh yeah,
and if you here's the thing, to your point, Seth, punishment is essential. I'm not saying but because they're level, like, right? If I do, imagine if
my actions have an equal and positive negative thing that is going to not make me happy in some way, right?
My goal as a parent is a few things, but one of them is making them an acceptable citizen in society, and part of that is it's not okay to bite people, kind of thing. At least with my son, kind of thing. And you need to, and you just don't, and you can't tell a 2-year-old don't bite, kind of. Got a little.
You do tell them that. You should tell them that. You just don't need to yell at them about that.
But you do other things too, like the little pinch kind of thing, and you let them know you're serious. But from the bedtime routine, I mean. They want songs, so there's a few songs we sing, and then the little talking kind of thing, and it's like okay, and I'm like, and then it's like it's time.
Is it Italian songs that we sing? It's got to be like oh solo mio.
I tried that once, but
only Frank Sinatra songs is what you will sing.
So we actually, and I'm not even making this up. They love New York, New York.
Oh, of course they would.
Which unfortunately. Riles them up. Am I still there?
You're still here.
He's all my okay. So and then we slow it down into like the other like the little songs that mean something. But again, depending on the mood that they're in, they're gonna try to push it. Then you let them know where the hard stop is.
Yes.
And they'll say all of a sudden like their stomach hurts or their throat hurts, and you're like, yeah.
And then like what I love is you have to be careful of like how much information you give them.
It's like little sponges.
You can't say, and the line is drawn, unless you really unless you have an emergency, unless you need mom and dad for an emergency. Then everything's an emergency, right?
Yes.
Like, oh my stomach hurts. Does it really? I'm like, no, it doesn't. They're just like,
the coughing begins.
Yeah, that worked last night for me. Right? Like,
oh my goodness, yes.
It's funny. Kids are ever evolving, and it's hilarious how us parents fall out of touch so fast. Of like,
I had to literally remind myself. I have to literally remind myself. Their brains are still being developed. Like it's they're still working. Like there are cases and there's no censor, there's no filter to what's coming out of them at this point. Like I'm an adult, and sometimes I expect way too much out of them. I want them to act like an adult would act, and like, why can't you? That's not right. They're just not there yet. So I got to keep So to bring this all back about data, what
let's see the segue here.
Let's see the segue. Right? What punishments can we add to our data process? To people who abuse power.
No, we're not doing that. Let's stick with the topic until you find a better
let's just say our topic is today.
All right, let's just do better transition. We won't add punishments to our BI practice at this point. So we'll move on. All right. So fun intro, fun opener. We're just getting slap happy now. We've done so many recordings. We're just going crazy. So anyways, we're jumping in now. Topic for today. 45 minutes into the episode. Thank you for still staying. All 3 of you who are still here, thank you for staying with us. We're going to get to the real topic. We promise. Today, we're talking about DAX for style. Tommy, what does that mean? What's the topic all about here? DAX for style? DAX is calculating numbers. What are we talking about?
Yeah, it's all about your aggregations and your DAX filter context, but there's a whole other side of DAX that I don't know if they initially built it that way, but there's a whole other subsection of DAX to use from a dynamic point of view from a user experience. That DAX can be used solely for user experience. And we're talking about
Yeah. Give me some examples.
What's
a tangible example?
Some of the usual suspects are your drilled through page, having what you drilled through into. Like, hey, you're looking at these details, or conditional formatting. Those are the two huge ones where you can use DAX or a DAX measure to basically say the weighted gradient on a bar chart, or to show something that's red, green, or good, bad, or neutral. But it can be using either a DAX measure you created or something specific for it. There's a bunch of other things in there, and I think the conversation today is, what are those use cases, and how effective are they, and where is too much?
DAX for style. I like it.
We missed an opportunity. I think we should ask this to the Italians.
We should have.
How do you like messing around in the frilly?
I'm going to apologize right now to Greg Baldini. This is another topic we talked about, but we did not consult you first before. We're going to get paragraphs. I can see it already. Greg's going to write his paragraphs of bring it, Greg, bring it.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna have like this most simplest basic examples of like where we can use DAX to stylize things, and Greg's gonna come up with this amazing stuff that's gonna be like blowing our mind. We're like, oh, we probably should have thought about that.
Where else? else?
Yeah, exactly right. All right, so I'll throw some things off the top of my head here, things that I've seen DAX use to help stylize things. One thing I've seen that's very elaborate, and this is one that top of mind where it comes from. You can use the HTML visual. There's a custom visual on the app source area where you can have HTML written that would generate a part of a visual. The HTML visual lets you run HTML inside the Power BI desktop. And if you want to add styling or approaches or formatting for very specific things, you can write HTML. And I've seen DAX statements create a block of code, a block of HTML that is then used inside a visual. And then as you click on things, the HTML actually adjusts itself and redraws things. So that's one of my first examples. And maybe we should go around the horn here. Maybe we should actually have everyone pick up an idea and like, what's one place that you find it? So that's my one for right now. What do you guys think? Have you used it?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's not easy to do that.
No. I've used it in the past. Maybe you implemented it where I know the use case.
Actually, does it involve circles?
Yes.
And a scrollable. Yes, that was my.
So maybe I was your beta version, and you just kept on rolling with it.
I kept rolling with it. So here's the use case example. I needed a card that was scrollable. Like I needed a visual that could have a scroll bar at the bottom part of the card. I was like, how the heck are we gonna do that? But there is no standard visual that lets you scroll inside the context of the visual. I mean, the table does. We're not building tables. That's not what I want to build. I want to build a graphical thing. So I used the HTML visual. I think it's HTML5 visual or whatever. I think is that what it's called? HTML5 visual. I used that visual. I wrote some custom code, and then inside that visual, it now renders the HTML that's much longer than the actual visual iframe, the frame of the visual. So then you get this scrollable interface where you could actually scroll visuals further to the right or to the left. So kind of an interesting little use case there.
So how many times have you used that?
I've done it probably about 3 other times doing different. So that was one of them. I did another HTML visual where I was building it was basically taking some images and graphics from a table list and trying to parse them together to build like a little, it's taking like multiple things from a Power BI data set, URLs, HTML piece, little images and stuff, and trying to do like a product catalog kind of thing. You want products to appear. So I was doing some more fancy stuff with that. I'm trying to think of the other one. I feel like there was one more that I did. I want to say it was something like a thermometer or some kind of like graphic that I was drawing, or doing something with like spark lines or SVG, something where the SVG was being built in there and I was rendering the SVG back into the visual. I think actually
that's hardcore, man. Like that,
yeah, that's big dev stuff.
DAX in such advanced cases.
Do you even remember what DAX is these days? He's the actor on Dax Shepard. That actor guy.
DAX data Star Trek. What?
Well,
no, I mean the use cases I've done are, and not recently, but the more generic cases are probably just conditional formatting of cells in matrix or tables, and then dynamic title, right? Like when you're
that's a good one.
Switching out measures that you're using in a calculation, right? That your titles automatically change along with that. Would be probably the two most prevalent use cases I recall.
Yeah.
No,
and tell me about your conditional formatting. Were you outputting a number that was being used to conditionally format, or were you actually outputting like hex codes that you would then use?
So both, right?
Okay,
so
both.
You'd produce the number and the hex code along that, like typically.
Gotcha.
So you're red and green, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Even within their icon, right, of up down arrow or whatever the case may be.
That
makes sense.
And I think we're all talking about the crux of this is user experience, right? Like another big one too is adding in a link to a web page. So we had a really cool one where it is like there's a straightforward DAX with this, and there's something I think with the HTML, but like what we did was we had a report that basically linked to a product catalog that was built in Power Apps.
Yep.
Which you then can configure is so any user, if they wanted to edit that product, could just go right to the Power App. It would bring them dynamically to that particular product or that particular item. And that ability, because then you don't have to create a calculated column. It's all based on the selected value, everybody's best friend. And I think the biggest part of this is enhancing that user experience. The titles, that's what I was going to say, Seth, where
You're going too fast. Slow down.
Too fast.
HTML or
it's late, man.
URL links that you were trying to build. I want to know more about what you're doing in there, right? So you had an HTML. So I think of an HTML URL. It's quite long. It has a lot of HTTPS.
I know where you're going with this. Yes.
There may be some like doodads inside it's complex, right? What were you using to formulate the HTML? Did you have like a SKU number that was like a column with SKUs in it?
Exactly.
And then you made a measure that took that SKU and parsed it into another URL.
Yeah. So basically we use variables to get the base URL.
Okay.
And every product, like every item had
the base
code.
URL.
So, and then in Power Apps, even you can do this on Dynamics too.
Yeah.
So
this could be a big problem because URLs are incredibly difficult to work with. They just take up a lot of space. They're big text strings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so but you're talking about constructing a URL, right? As long as you have standard formats for how the URLs are created, it's very easy within an application to just insert IDs in the appropriate spaces.
And we can do it for web images too.
Right. Images, locate, like so. So those links back into an application are extremely easy to generate, but you bring up a separate thing that actually we talked about and we didn't have an opportunity to talk to the Italians is like storage of
that's true.
The URL strings that don't conform to that, right? Like a URL string in general, man, my nightmare
nasty.
that one of my guys is solving right now.
Yeah. Really?
Put that in a variables, and that's basically what we did.
Yeah, for the ones that you can construct, but there's an opposite side of this where it's like if your part of your data set is random URLs that you're ingesting and have to produce,
there's no pattern to them. Yeah, what are you gonna do? Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and I think for everything there's always a solution, but it's amazing. Utilize I know, right? Well, no, yeah, but like I'm sure it's going to figure it out because there's that basic side of just like add a URL and write, but then utilizing all like the variables of DAX, utilizing the logic of DAX. It's amazing what people have come up with too, to kind of say that if and logic.
Yeah, you can
construct for a selected value.
Well, that's true too. That's another good one. There's not a really good visual to indicate what the filter context on the report page.
Right.
So you kind of can build these more elaborate strings, and I've used one where like concatenate X or something like that.
SQL BI did that, I think.
Is that SQL BI's one?
Yeah.
Oh, and they had a filter context dump measure? Didn't they have that one time where they basically did a whole? I mean, it's a huge DAX measure.
Measure dumps or whatever. Yeah.
Measured data filter context dump or something like that. I'll have to look that one up. That's a googly one that we'll have to look at. But that's kind of interesting to see how like they took a lot of text and parsed it into a tooltip that you could then use that filter context that would go right into showing people exactly what you're selecting. I think that's another good use case.
Another one too is, and not widely used, but a lot of people don't even know this exists in the theme or in the visual side, but you obviously have your tooltips, right? Where you have like your drill up, drill down. Well, you can enable, and you can do this globally in the theme, what's called a help tooltip. So every visual basically has this little question mark. And usually you have to actually write manually like what this is actually showing, but you can make that actually dynamic to like a report tooltip. So that's a whole and it's actually real.
Help me understand more what's going on there. So you have a DAX measure. The help icon is dynamic? Is it what you select in the report?
So the help icon goes to a report page tooltip. So you hover,
yes, and got it.
And then that has all the selected values, the DAX things. So he's saying, hey, this, and it was basically a dynamic way to try to show the definition. Like you're looking at total sales. So based on the filter context of that visual, and then it would say like if total sales is selected or however we filtered it out.
Wait a minute. Can you use? Oh man, I'm blowing my mind right now by you saying that. Can we make a tooltip that has the natural language DAX on it?
The natural language DAX?
Isn't there like a natural language visual?
Like Q&A, you mean? Or the narrative?
The narrative visual, or maybe it's the narrative what I'm thinking of. Isn't there like a natural language, like it just writes the text of what's the filter context of what those data fields are on
what you mean.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Does that work?
I haven't tried it.
I've never tried this. That would be pretty
about
slick.
to, so
yeah, right. All right, podcast done. We're gonna go build some
stuff amongst yourself for a sec. Yeah,
we're gonna need about 10 minutes to figure this one out. But that would be cool because you could have you could have the info button on every visual, and it says year-to-date sales went up 10%. Da 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 da. Whatever the things it says.
Right. Well, the biggest part of all of this with the DAX, and I do want to ask this question. It's all about the user experience and helping the user out, whether it's the conditional formatting, the URL with the hyperlink, or the dynamic text. How effective are they? Like, are they for a Power BI developer? Is there a minimum value that they should know if you're interview, like from the interview side? Like if you say you're a Power BI pro, all right. So what should you know and how to implement from a minimum?
I got it. I know the answer to this one.
Oh boy.
As soon as someone that you're interviewing, you give them a Power BI report and say, all right, go download the HTML visual and make me a visual.
Can you give me a scrolling bar? Yeah.
I need a scrolling visual. Please go have that. I'll be back in 30 minutes. I expect it to be done. If they can do that, hire them in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I would too. So you're saying you should have only charged me 30 minutes of time to figure that out?
Exactly. Should have been easy peasy. You should have that in the bag. Yeah, but that's right. What is the threshold on these things? So I would probably rank these based on what we've talked about so far. Where of these options provides the maximum amount of visual value for each of these features, right? Okay, HTML visual, writing custom HTML in a measure. Interesting, cool. Maybe has some special use case if you're producing a very highly stylized report. Not really required, I think, in most report use cases. However, the one I'm looking at here that to me rings a bell is showing colors, the dynamic color formatting. It's red, it's green, the background's good or bad. We're providing a gradient or a color range across things. To me, that one sounds like a very valuable thing. And I think of all these items that we've talked about so far, I think that brings the most bang for its buck.
Ironically enough, I'll be going through interviews again because I have an opening on my team.
Nice.
I think what's more interesting is not necessarily like asking about specific stylistic ways you can use DAX, but what are the ones that you know, right? So, like, of course, I'm creating a measure, and you can create specific measures for a specific visual. Does that mean it's DAX for style? Right? Not necessarily, right? It's the metric within there. We're talking about like the ancillary outside of things like title, conditional formatting,
yes,
etc. But at the same time, could you argue that like a summarized table or bucketing things and, you know, creating things specifically in a rolled up fashion for a particular visual falls into that category? I don't know. Either way, would I expect that if I asked someone in an interview, describe for me some of the ways you can use DAX for styling a visual, would I expect them to say conditional formatting, title, like, you know, whatever? Yeah. I mean, at the base level, I would expect them to be able to understand, like, yeah, that's a feature you can do, depending on their level of expertise, right? Because it's not necessary. Like, to me, a lot of implementations may not be like, you can't just pull that out of the hat in an interview. But if you know it's possible, then you're much further along than somebody who's just like, they'd look at a requirement and get stuck for 3 days because they have no idea that it's actually a feature that they can implement.
Another one that I agree with you, Seth, there on that one. And another, as you were talking about that, what are the basics I should have someone know about? I think another one here is, if you showed someone, a person you're interviewing, if you showed them a report where you calculated a measure that returned a blank value, sum of this column, and then you select something in the data model that has a blank, that returns a blank value. In that card, in the KPI card, you see the word blank appear, right? Being able to build a DAX statement that is able to protect against blanks, I think is very valuable as well, especially when you're talking about KPI metrics or KPI cards. So I a lot of reports that I do, I use, and this is one of the techniques I like to use, I use DAX generator. I use DAX generator to build common patterns of DAX for me, so I don't have to keep rebuilding these things over and over again. And one of them is taking a measure and wrapping it in an if statement. If blank, write this value. Write down a text string that says, dash dash or 0 or blank or NA, some other indicator that just doesn't say blank. Because I can't stand reports when someone has nothing selected. There's a whole bunch of words that say blank all over the page. It looks horrible.
So that's part of your minimum requirements of any report, not just from the skill point of view, but of any report being 100%. Developed, you have to have that.
I mean, I think this is a pattern that I'm using, again, almost on every report now. Whenever we're having KPI cards, I don't want them to show the word blank anymore.
For any filter, right?
For any filter context there. Whatever again, I don't know what people are going to click in the report. And especially when I work a lot on projects where reports are being built in an application, and that application is going to clients, right? Maybe there's a bit more stress on me.
Yeah.
On
blank
me.
Works real well in those
yeah, they're like, right? Something's wrong. It says blank, but you can't have that showing up. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
There's an overhead to that, though.
Yes.
From a calculation standpoint.
Well, I think what I've aligned on is, when I need stylized measures like that, particularly when I'm trying to hide the blank values, I don't want to make a table and use that measure in that table. That measure is designed for a KPI card. It's calculating a single value. Yeah. I don't want to calculate it for 100,000 rows of a data table, because that will blow up your data model and you'll get the message out of memory, can't do it.
That is interesting what the cache is on that measure that you're doing. And I think that you're kind of going to not a different point from what I was thinking of style is, I think a lot of times too, and I think what's his name? Bernat Arguello has done some really great articles on this too, is on tables, depending on what to display, not just conditional formatting or text. But I think another part of this too is the data that is actually returned, where if you're doing, like, to your point, Seth, like a measure roll up, right? Or you're displaying text on the field. If certain things are selected, what should be displayed from a user experience? And I think that, I don't want to say that that's not hugely impactful, but it's a neat thing to do. But I think that's more scenario based, not necessarily like a global thing that you should develop in your reports.
I mean, what's the risk to some of these things, right? I mean, if I'm thinking about, like, how, if I'm auto injecting DAX so here let me say it this way. I think more people would be apt to use these stylized DAX features if they were easier to produce inside a report. Let me say, and like what I mean by that is if you had if all of these things lived in quick measures and I could just click, boom, measures created, it works for me, or select these 5 measures and create one new measure on top of all, like for each one, create them fast. Tabular editor, maybe, for example, right? Building patterns around that. To me, I'm looking at it going, well, then these measures aren't like the pattern. All you have to do is establish the pattern once and reuse the code over and over and over again. There's no reason why that couldn't be like, here's the 7 patterns that we found that work well for us in our reports.
Oh yeah, I got macros and macros for day and tabular editor.
That's what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
But you've gotten to the point right now as a developer where you don't even you're not writing the basic DAX anymore. And I get lazy so much so that I'm like, oh man, I got to go I don't want to write this. I spend more time writing the template to make the DAX than to write the actual DAX because once I get it done once, I can just repeatedly copy paste that thing in one after another.
Let's establish the minimum then. Like for a given report, whether it is in an embedded scenario,
okay,
or it's again from an internal, like in the service, tell me your minimum things that you should do from a style, if any, from a DAX point of view that you should really consider or have baked into your report.
My minimum, protecting against zeros, protecting against blanks. That's my minimum. You got to be able to do that. And I would say my other minimum would be, got to know how to do conditional formatting with DAX measures, either entering a number or entering a switch statement where I'm picking colors. To me, those would be my minimums. How about you, Seth?
Not minimum for skill, minimum for, like, if you were to say globally for every report, every report that you create, would that be part of each report?
The
blanks, yes.
The blanks, yes. Conditional formatting, I don't think that would be in every. So if I'm thinking about the mindset of model and then report.
Okay.
I would put the protected DAX statements in text form in a folder in the main model, potentially. I think I would seriously consider that because I use it so often. The conditional formatting for coloring, I don't think I would put that in the model. I might put that in a thin report. Because if it's a thin report, then maybe we won't use it in every single. That's more circumstantial. What do you guys think? What do you think, Seth?
I think all these are circumstantial, right? Like for style, it's going to depend on whether or not you're applying some of those principles to a particular visual, or there's a need for it. Mm-hmm. I don't think you're going to use them every single. I can't say I used any of stylistic DAX patterns or conditional formatting in every single report I've used. Like to me, there's no standard implementation that I'm going to do in every single report all the time.
I would say if you're using a drill, I think obviously there's not one thing that you should do for each one, but there's a base of, like, any drill through page that we have is using DAX. That's a requirement to me, where you need to have as the dynamic title on what the details are. And if someone gets to that page somehow without the right filtering, then it says like multiple things selected, or all, please go back and select.
I would say that's a good best practice, but I don't think every report contains drill through.
Right. I'm saying
I think what Seth's point is, I think Seth's point is, if it's on every single report, then I consider it a standard. I mean, I described, it's probably like on 90% of my reports, or 90% of my reports have KPI cards, which I probably want to protect against having blanks. Okay. So the likelihood of my scenario might be a bit more common. Tommy, your scenario is like, how many reports have drill throughs? Probably not 90%, but maybe 75, 60%. So less common maybe than some of these other scenarios.
Right.
But I get your point.
As I often do, let me rephrase. What are those DAX style?
That's another shirt. Excuse me. Let me rephrase.
Let me rephrase.
What are those DAX style dependencies on depending what you're doing? So, like, for example, if you're doing KPI cards, you have that. You're always doing that. If I have drill through, you're doing that.
Yes.
I would agree. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
For those normal things.
Given a design scenario.
Yes.
What's your normal?
What's the baseline for DAX styling?
Seth? It all hinges on you.
No pressure. I don't understand the question. What are you trying to ask?
The question,
Mike? Can you filter for?
Bring it home for me, man.
Seth doesn't understand the filter context. We gotta give him some more filter context.
Exactly.
Quick, get DAX Studio. I need to. Okay, Seth, I'm gonna reduce the cardinality here for you. All right?
Yeah, please.
How many more jokes can we do? Come on, a script for this yet?
Okay. Dad jokes. Come on, this is great. All right,
DAX jokes. Yeah.
Oh, even better. All right. I think what Tommy is saying is, in a certain design scenario, given there's requirements, we're going to use drill through. We're going to have KPI cards. There are certain things that you would definitely want to do or very highly consider that that's part of your process. So like, if you're going to use coloring based on, if there's a specific feature that you're going to do or use.
You're going to use conditional formatting.
If you're going to even use, like if you're going to conditional format anything, right? If that's a feature you're going to use, you're going to always use this thing. Now, granted, conditional formatting is probably a bad example because it does use DAX anyways, but doesn't. Anyways, we'll see. Do you have any absolute, Seth? Is there any things that you would say, yes, I'd highly recommend you know how to do this type of DAX styling in this kind of scenario? I still don't understand the question.
Sure. Yeah, I highly recommend that. Like in everything that you do, like if you have to go through and do something like derive a title that dynamically changes with measures, that you take that example and throw it into a pattern or a template or a process where somebody can reuse the same code in another report. Yes.
Well, all right, let's move on.
Maybe I'm still not understanding the question, but like, yes.
Well, let's
of
those. Let's run with the DAX.
If I say yes, can we just move on?
Can we end the podcast? This stupid topic. Can you tell this is the third hour we're at it in a row?
Oh, I hope you guys are laughing as much as we are. I'm enjoying myself thoroughly here on this one. So anyone who's listening, I hope you're enjoying this as well. We're not usually these episodes usually aren't this good.
When there's no substance at all.
Speak for yourself, Mike.
20 minutes about this was about how much I yell at my kids. So yeah. All right. Let me completely move on because obviously
moving on.
That had no legs. It had no legs.
How
truly with whatever you utilize with this, how much impact does this have? Can this not necessarily make or break a report, but can this really make that marginal effort from what we talked about with making visual confusing to cognitive load? Can this be highly effective or okay.
Oh yeah. 100% agree. Oh yeah.
Tell me more.
Tell me more.
Well, you think about what, like, even these examples that we're doing, and I keep going back to them because I've used them, right? The dynamic title, right? Like something changes, I select it, and then the title changes. That makes more sense. Why the visual changed, but so did the text saying like, hey, you're now looking at this measure, right? It's a total sales. Now it's the average, right? Like, so you're reinforcing what somebody's seen in the visual in that context. In conditional formatting, right? Highlighting a cell, right? In green or
I get
red,
that request a lot.
Instant help, right?
Yes.
Like now you're drawing my attention to the area that is most useful to me dynamically as I rip through filters and do all these other changes. And like, yeah, that speeds up me deriving insights from the visual that you're presenting. So in both those cases, right, a little bit more behind the scenes work absolutely reinforces I'm going to make this as simple as possible in a presentable way that you can easily digest this information, more so than you just looking at a table that's black and white. So I would say, 100%. There's many different ways the complexity of adding the DAX behind the scenes simplifies the user experience.
I think for me, the most requested feature I get around anything conditional formatting for DAX is by far conditional formatting by color. Red or green or red and blue or some kind of like two contrasting colors that tells me when something's good and when something's bad, right? And I think that's another key indicator of good reporting, when you can use color to visually indicate things are I need to pay attention to it or I don't. That is a strong emotion, I guess, that we're playing with or we're utilizing when we build those kind of reports with those kind of features in them. So that would be what I would say.
I think the color part's really underrated, especially with, I don't know when they added this to visuals, but if you add a conditional formatting to like a bar chart, it will actually, the legend will actually, pretty recently, will actually show you
the
like
gradient.
what that range is.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, from a context point of view, huge. And I think there's obviously, you don't want to add it to every visual because then it's just too much load. But for what you're really trying to highlight, I think one of the more underrated techniques that we can do from a visual point of view.
I'd agree with that one.
Now the title one is interesting because I went down a lot, like when this first came out, I remember like, I'm going to add this to every visual on every report because this is so awesome that you can say what measure and what's being filtered kind of thing. And I was like, this is, however, you run into the problem very early when, if you have 5 visuals and like one's country, one's product,
5 measures,
all of a sudden, or like, and do you have to do it for every title? Do you have to create a measure for every title? What if there's multiple fields on that So I think there is a point.
Why doesn't the visual just do, to me, this is a prime example of the in-visual calculation that should be running. The visual itself should be, you should be able to tick a button that says, what do you want to show?
Like auto plug in variables and just choose.
Yeah, no, the doggone visual is already smart enough to know that you've selected, like the visual's already showing all the data in the visual. Why not make a toggle option? Ideas.pirate.com. Here we go again. You can literally click a bar in a chart and it immediately says, you selected, enter number here. The value of that thing is this number. Like you could literally have it format in the bar chart exactly as you wanted to without having to write any. That to me is it's a measure management nightmare. I don't want to write for every visual on every report page. I don't want to write a single measure for all that. It should just work.
I don't. This one I'm gonna push back because think about the context of if you're drilled down. If you're looking at like, what if I selected a certain country on one visual, am I saying now like, sales by that one country selected? If I'm drilled down, am I looking at this, like the states? I think there's a lot of ways that,
If you're talking about drill down in a single visual, right?
So, but that would also affect the other visuals.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, I'm changing. The reason I'm making the title change is for the one bar chart to tell me in the line what I selected in that bar chart. You selected the country called USA.
Are affected. Yeah.
So are you going to write, is every other visual on the page getting this is showing USA data?
I don't know but if you have this auto populated, how would you know what to show and what not to show?
I mean, it's not my problem. Microsoft engineers are smart. They got to figure it out. Like I'm the ideas guy. I don't care about execution. That's somebody else's problem.
Right.
It should just be easier. But Tommy, for your argument, I wouldn't want to put in every chart you selected the state of the country of USA because that's wasteful because now you're saying the same thing 5 times on every single visual. That doesn't make sense. You would if you're going to do that, you would move that information up to a card or some other place on the report page that no matter which visual you select, it'd only be in one spot. So I don't feel like I would do that.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that would be something I would design for.
Yeah. I think there's a point to where it gets to the bloat, but to me, like, I think the foundation here that we've all established is like from the very basic is the conditional formatting and what context that provides. And for me, that other side is call it the helper text, right? Where I see myself more and more now, if I have a drill through page, I have a button for that drill through page. I'm not relying on that user to right click on something to understand that. And I have that as another measure saying, hey, click on this, click on the thing right above this, you dummy, to go to the drill through page. And then that says, learn more about whatever country you select.
Yeah. Do this or Tommy's going to come yell at you. You dummy. You dummy.
For a brief moment in time, I really enjoyed the fact that you guys were arguing with each other. Yeah.
I don't even think we were.
Yeah, that was.
I'm sorry. At least disagreeing.
Was that an Italian argument?
Seth, it didn't meet our standards, but like so.
Yeah, Seth sits up straight when he's arguing with Tommy and gets really into the microphone and really he's really pissed.
I'm not. I'm passionate.
He's a passionate
individual. I'm not angry about it. I just have an opinion.
I just highly disagree.
Change my mind. Change my mind. No, change my mind.
Visual headers that dynamically change my mind.
Clearly.
Is there anything else that we can think of? Is there any other DAX related styling things that we can think of? I can only think of one more that I can think of. Using the star ratings. I just saw someone blog about this on the LinkedIn, talking about making different stars that you could have a star rating for. So it's like a you have products, right? It's like Amazon, right? You get a star rating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever that number is, right? And you want to indicate in the table or on a chart or somewhere based on a number from 1 to 5, what's the star rating, and visually show stars that are either colored or something like that. How do you do that?
Or half stars
or moons or like whatever the little icon or image is, doing that as well. I think that's another DAX thing that you can go build, where you can actually have people build out a var car or a variable character or whatever that's called. But you can do a var car.
There's a lot of things you can do with that.
Yeah, I've seen a one from Chris Webb. I saw another one last week from somebody, Nikolai, I think is maybe what's his name, who was also doing the same thing. So that's another one where I could say another example that might be used. But again, I don't ever really use it. It's not very common. Anything else? Final thoughts?
DAX.
Final thoughts. DAX. Love it. I dig it. Well, gentlemen, for everyone who's listening, or if you're still with us, thank you very much. I hope you had a fun time with us. We talked about DAX and styling. Not sure why we did, but it's been a fun topic. I enjoyed it. Do pretty things. We'll leave with that thought. If you like this podcast, if you enjoyed the conversation and the talk here, we'd really appreciate it if you give us a like, hit the bell, subscribe if you don't mind. And if you liked it so much, please share it over social media, as we really appreciate the positive feedback, and it helps other people learn and discover the podcast as well. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find it anywhere it's available: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever the other things are. Make sure to subscribe so you can find all the things going on. And guys, thanks for listening to all these recordings. For those who are audio, we have no idea what we're talking about live. Don't worry about it. We'll see you next week.
Don't worry about it.
Get us out of here.
See ya. All right, bye. This is the outro. Here we go. Bye.